A decorated fighter and serviceman to his country, Brian All-American Stann has faced his toughest battles outside the octagon. Having endured a rough upbringing through strict discipline, Stann would enroll and graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy. Trials and tribulations during his time as a Marine later provided Stann a chance to begin training in mixed martial arts. The Silver Star recipient seized the opportunity, paving the way to a title in World Extreme Cage Fighting. Stann has since taken his talents to the UFC, where he's made an instant impact in the middleweight division. A tremendous fighter and role model, Brian Stann is our guest on Fighting Words with Mike Straka. From HDNet, this is Fighting Words with Mike Straka. This week's guest, Brian All-American Stann.
Welcome to Fighting Words. I'm Mike Straka. My guest tonight is a guy who has nothing else to prove in his entire life. His name is Brian, the All-American Stann. Brian, thanks for doing the show.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Brian, you know, when I read your book, I didn't even know you went to Annapolis. I had no idea you were in the Naval Academy, and you played football for them. And you know, you were in a way, it was like a Rudy story, because you know you were recruited to be a quarterback. You ended up playing defense. You didn't start till your junior year, but you stuck with it. Explain your journey from being a football player to being an MMA fighter.
Well, you know, I think football really prepared me for the realism factor that comes with this sport. And that if you're not going to perform and you're not going to be the #1 guy at your spot, then you're not going to be there. And with football, especially at the Division I level, it's full time. And so you could watch yourself on the depth chart come into practice every single day. You dropped a spot because you played poorly, or you moved up a spot. And it made me realize that I have to go out there and compete. And my transition from the WEC to the UFC was that. You know, I first came to the UFC, I wasn't ready to compete, but I didn't want to leave. So I didn't want to be one of those guys to leave the UFC, go fight locally, and then try and fight my way back. So I had to find a way to compete. I had to now build myself up, rebuild myself as a fighter, get the skills necessary to stay at this level. And obviously, Greg Jackson, Mike Winklejohn in Albuquerque, New Mexico were a big part of that.
I'm going to jump real quick to your first loss against Steve Cantwell. You were the champ, right? And you lost the belt to him. And you went on the web the next day and you read about, hey, if this is what the Marines do, if they quit like that, then we're in big trouble in Iraq. What did that do to you?
It broke my heart. And for me, it wasn't what they were saying to me. It wasn't anything personal. But I honestly felt like I let the Marine Corps down. I thought I let all the guys that had served with me and everyone that was wearing a uniform at that time down that night. And it was a 2-week recovery period for me, which I've never been down that long in my life. And it took a lot for me to come back from that. But comments like that made me feel like I wasn't a Marine that night. I wasn't a Marine anymore. And that was a huge turning point for me, because that was the only fight that I could honestly say that I just wasn't myself. I was not myself that night at all. I allowed myself to not believe in me for the first time in my life, and I'll never let that happen again.
When you were doubting yourself that night for that fight, you walked in and you knew you were going to lose, didn't you?
I did. I did. I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. I had been training with a group of Marines that weren't very skilled. None of us were. But we believed in each other. It was such a positive environment that I won all my fights with those guys. I moved to Atlanta, got out of the Marine Corps, started a new job, and oh, by the way, you have a title fight in 6 weeks. And bought my first home all in that period of time, was training at 3 different gyms. And at all 3 of those gyms, all my trainers kept telling me was, hey, you know, you need to work on this, you need to work on this, you need to work on that. This is a hole, this is a gap, this is a weakness. All of that negativity was just building up inside me, making me believe that I was not going to win that fight. Knowing that Steve was more skilled in every single area than me, I caught him by surprise in the first fight. And I realized how much the mental psyche plays on a fight. Had I gone in there like I normally would have, I may have beat him that night. Who knows? And just stormed through everything he had and been myself. Instead, I went in there trying to play some kind of game and be somebody I wasn't, full of doubt, and I got my butt kicked. And you know, it's a lesson for anybody in life. If you're not believing in yourself, if you're not confident in what you're doing, you need to reset, reevaluate. Don't go in and perform with that mindset. Be strong enough to tell somebody, because I wasn't. I didn't want anybody to see that weakness in me or tell anybody I had any doubts, and I paid a price for it.
Do you think being so hard on yourself for having those doubts comes from your battle training where you can't have doubts out in the field?
You're absolutely correct. Had I ever gone into a mission in Iraq with doubt in my mind like I had that night, I would have lost men. And, you know, for a Marine Corps officer, or any officer for that matter, you're not concerned with yourself getting hurt. You care less about that. You're responsible for the men and women under your command. And had I gone into a mission where I wasn't sure about my plan, about my tactics, the audibles I was going to call, and I would have lost Marines, forget losing a fight. That's regret for the rest of your life.
All right, let's talk about Brian Stann for a second, and you can fill in the gaps. Scranton, Pennsylvania, you grew up in a tough neighborhood where you got jumped by 2 adults at one point, where all your friends ran away from you, and you got your butt kicked really bad. You had a tough upbringing. Your mom raised you. You went to Annapolis mainly because you liked the discipline, but also because you were recruited and it was free. You end up in Iraq. You become, what's your rank?
Captain.
Captain. You win a Silver Star for Valor, which is the 3rd highest military award awarded to anybody. You start MMA. You become the WEC champion. It is 2011, and on the first day of 2011, you beat your biggest opponent in your entire career by way of knockout, Chris Lieben. It's been quite a journey for you from a kid from Scranton, Pennsylvania. First of all, was your mother there for that Lieben fight?
She wasn't. She wasn't. It's better. She enjoys staying home for it. She gets a little too nervous when she goes live nowadays.
What did she say?
You know, she shot me a message right after the fight, and she just said, honey, you're a great son. And she was more proud of the things I had to say after the fight than the fight itself. She could care less about that part. She just cares that I don't get hurt, and that if I'm doing this, I'm doing it because I enjoy it and for no other reason.
You dedicated that fight to a fallen hero. Who was that person?
Garrett Meisner. He was a Marine who served with me during my 2nd tour in Iraq in 2006, 2007. After that tour, I started doing a martial arts class on the base for Marines with post-traumatic stress. And he would also come there as well 2 nights a week and train under me and go through some of the exercises and the discussion groups. And he was a guy that volunteered to deploy again. He was at a point in his career where he could have gone to some kind of shore duty where he could have been an instructor for 4 years, had some family time, had a social life. Instead, he chose to go to a deploying unit again, which would mean basically 8 continuous years of combat for this young man. I believe this was his 3rd or 4th combat deployment when he was killed. And, you know, it's difficult. I found that out the day before weigh-ins. And you know, as a fighter, you're not supposed to let emotions get into play and things of that nature. But for me, that kind of fuels me. And I can remember his face clearly. And it's hard for me not to have that on my mind. And knowing that he volunteered to do that puts into perspective, what am I going to do? So what is a co-main event fight? You know, who cares? What
Brian,
Garrett did is amazing.
Wasn't the first time you were told right before a fight that you lost somebody. One of your first pro fights, your 2nd pro fight, I think, you were told right an hour before your fight that you lost one of your best friends in Afghanistan.
You know, it was odd. It was my 3rd amateur fight, and it was one of my best friends, Travis Mannion, who told me an hour before the fight that J.P. Blacksmith had been killed, and J.P. played football with me at the academy all 4 years. And about a year and a half later, I would actually be told that Travis was killed too, and it's tough because.
We'll take a break right there. Don't go anywhere. More with Brian Stann when we come back.
Coming up next on Fighting Words with Mike Straka.
You were caught in a kill zone with a Mike 88. How far did you have to get out of there?
That's coming up next on Fighting Words with Mike Straka. Welcome back to Fighting Words with Mike Straka. This week's guest, Silver Star recipient Brian Stann.
Welcome back to Fighting Words. Brian Stann is my guest tonight. Brian, thank you for being so honest with us as well and being so open. I went to Walter Reed Hospital with Frankie Edgar and Eddie Alvarez and Gregor Gracie. And we went around and we visited with troops there. A lot of them, they have no arms, no legs. These guys were even training in jiu-jitsu with one leg. It was amazing to see how they believe in themselves. And what they've given up for our country is, I mean, it's just amazing. But when I talk to them, a lot of these guys were hit with IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And they really say, man, those guys are cowards out there. They just blow up bombs on the side of the road. There's no firefight. When I read your book, you dealt with Zarqawi's private security forces, and even your commanders were surprised at their coordination and their gear and their armaments. At the El Anbar province, were you dealing with probably the toughest guys out there?
We were. It was an elite unit comprised not of Iraqis, but many foreign fighters from different countries, et cetera. You know, we had actually encountered some men from Sudan, Chechnya, and you know, the men or the insurgents that are deploying improvised explosive devices are normally just pawns. They're people who a foreign fighter or a true terrorist will come and say, listen, I'm going to give you $50. You're going to put this bomb in the road, and I'm going to teach you how. If you don't do it, I'm going to kill you and your entire family. So now this Iraqi man has no choice. When you encounter certain elite units that have been fighting since the Russians were in Afghanistan, they have developed very good tactics, ambush tactics, where we call them complex ambushes, where not only will they establish assault positions with automatic machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades, but they have certain obstacles in your route that are going to stop you in what we call the kill zone, where they coordinate all their fire into one place. And several times we encountered some areas where that was exactly what their intentions were, and they used improvised explosive devices and suicide vehicles to stop our movement, trap my men in that kill zone, and forcing us to fight our way out, which obviously can cause some catastrophic kills on our vehicles and mass casualties on my Marines. And the very special thing about my Marines is when that happened and we were indeed trapped in the kill zone, we didn't take any more casualties. And you know, people will talk about the Silver Star, and this is why I tell people that this award is really representative of all my guys. When they were trapped in the kill zone, and there were just volleys of rocket-propelled grenades coming at them, machine gun fire hitting their vehicles, coming right at the gunners, while they're trying to medically evacuate the guys who were hit with a suicide vehicle, my guys were screaming back at the enemy. They wanted to be in a fight. They weren't scared. They weren't saying, sir, let's get the heck out of here. They wanted to stay right there and smash those guys right back in the mouth for what they did. And that's who these men are. And when I go speak to our warriors at events, I always tell them, because we don't realize it in the present, but we make movies on the Spartans, we make movies on the samurai, and all these ancient martial cultures that we just revel in their discipline and their valor and their courage. Our United States Army and United States Marines, Navy SEALs, all of our men and women that serve, these are today's elite warriors. 500 years from now, people will make movies and script reenactments and tell stories about these young men and women. So when you're going to Walter Reed, you're looking at today's Spartan, you're looking at today's samurai. That's their mindset. You could chop all four of their limbs off and they're going to come at you and bite you with their teeth. I mean, they will never give up on life because that's just who they are. And that's what makes them so special. That's why they volunteered at a time when our country's in 2 wars. They went and volunteered. That's why there's no draft. So people who maybe don't support the conflicts we're involved in need to be thankful for these men and women regardless, because they didn't come take their son or daughter and tell them they had to go over, because these young men and women said, I'll do it.
Now, when you were caught in that kill zone, I believe it was the intersection of Emerald and Diamond, or is that something? It was. All right, you had an M88. What is that?
A Mike 88 is actually, it's a tank recovery vehicle. It's a tank that moves very, very slow, but it's made to do repairs on a tank that we actually lost, or we had a catastrophic kill on from an IED 2 days earlier.
A tank, right?
No, we weren't towing it yet. We were going up there to tow it back.
Because the deal is you don't want the enemy to have one of your tanks, because it's good propaganda for them, right?
Oh, immense. And it's just millions of dollars worth of equipment. There's not a chance we're leaving that out there.
Now, I just want people to understand, you were caught in a kill zone, with a Mike 88 that goes 12 miles an hour?
12 miles an hour on a concrete surface.
And how far did you have to get out of there?
We had, I think it was about 150 meters to get out of there. So it was basically crawling. A tank can withstand blasts for an RPG, and they can normally withstand side blasts from IEDs. The Mike 88 got hit so much that the hull of the tank actually warped and cracked. So we lost the Mike 88 when we got up there as well, and it had to be towed back. It wasn't useful to even work on the tank that was up there.
And you saw insurgents going into a gas station, coming out reloaded with RPGs, and you ordered a bomb that came off of an F-16 fighter jet.
Correct.
And it blew a hole. And somebody came on the radio and said to you, in the heat of battle, you're going to have to answer for that, young man, whatever they said to you. What were you thinking then?
Honestly, I was thinking some bored lawyer is back in the command and control center with nothing else to do but bother me right now.
I can't believe that.
You know,
and this guy, he's a soldier, right? Or
he was a Marine.
He's a Marine. He's a Marine, and he would say that to you while you were still out there.
And, you know, it happens. I think in the heat of battle, he didn't think I coordinated properly to do that. And, you know, he wasn't an infantryman, so he actually doesn't know the rules when it's actually a troops in contact, as we call it, situation. And luckily, my chain of command called me back about 2 hours later saying, hey, you know, Lieutenant Stann, don't give that a second thought. Don't worry about a thing. You're doing the right moves out there. But at the time, I remember listening to it, heard it, and I basically called back and said, listen, you can fire me. I really don't care. You know, let me get my boys back and we'll talk about the discipline afterwards.
All right, don't go anywhere. When we come back with Brian Stann, we're going to find out how a court-martial brought him to where he is today.
Coming up next on Fighting Words with Mike Straka.
You were court-martialed when you were in Annapolis. Why?
That's coming up next on Fighting Words with Mike Straka. Welcome back to Fighting Words with Mike Straka. This week's guest, UFC middleweight Brian Stann.
Welcome back to Fighting Words. I'm Mike Straka. You were court-martialed when you were in Annapolis. Why?
I was in Quantico. It was during my basic officer training, and you know, we had a celebration when everybody got assigned their job specialties in the Marine Corps, which is a pretty big day. And you know, I had relations with a female who turned out that she was actually engaged to be married that I didn't know. And
which is a no-no in the military.
Absolutely. Anyways, I mean, alcohol was involved, and afterwards she accused me of forcing myself on her. And so I actually had to battle it in court because they offered me lesser forms of disciplinary action, which I refused to take because there could be some kind of mark on my record saying that it's basically up to one person's judgment on whether I did it or not. And so I decided and told them, no, I'm going to battle this the entire way. I did absolutely nothing wrong. She's lying. And, you know, there were 15 other people in the house, and somehow this wasn't reported until 48 hours later. In fact, she didn't even leave the house when, you know, when things were over. I say relations, I mean, it wasn't anything sexual. And so it was an unfortunate incident that sometimes in life, things are unfair. Sometimes you're dealt a bad deck. And I had 7 months to sit there and think about it and try and figure out why this woman did this to me. Why me? Why this was happening to me? And in the midst of all of that, a man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Shusko found me and brought me to the Martial Arts Center of Excellence in the Marine Corps and actually had me become an instructor in the Marine Corps Martial Arts program while I was waiting for this black cloud to finally clear up and leave so I can move on with my career.
And just to clear the record, because, you know, every time, as you know, you're ever accused of anything like that, people will say, oh, that's the guy. She took the stand and she blew her own case where your lawyer asked her, why didn't she call for help, or there's 15 other people, because she said you pinned her down. Why did you stay in the house? Why did you not report it for 2 days afterwards? All of these questions she couldn't answer, and the case was dismissed and you went back to your life. But that was 7 months of hell for you, wasn't it?
It was horrible. For a man like me.
And, I'm sorry, part of your punishment was you couldn't talk to any of your support group because those 15 guys were your best friends, and you couldn't talk to them. You were ordered not to talk to them.
That's correct. I was not allowed to speak to anybody. I had a restraining order on me because they were all considered witnesses. So I was basically on my own. For a man like me, I could lose games. I could lose fights. I can take people not liking me. But when you call into question my character and my honor, I have a problem. That's something you don't do. I'm a lot of things, but that's not who I am. And when you try and paint that on me, I will fight. I will fight to the death. I refuse to allow that to blemish not just my military record, but just my life record.
The Chinese symbol for crisis are two symbols together, opportunity and danger. Every time there's danger, there's an opportunity. It led you to mixed martial arts, and here you are today in the UFC. And after a win over Chris Lieben, propelling you into the talk about maybe Brian Stann could be a top 5 fighter in the middleweight division. You should have gone down to 85 sooner, shouldn't you have?
Absolutely. I should have. It was talked about, and I just, I didn't trust in my ability to deal with the weight change. Didn't really want to make that life change to make the weight and eat cleaner. But certainly when I found the right person, when I found my friend George Lockhart, it makes it easy.
All right. You know, enough about the adversity. You've had some pretty big ups too. One of those ups is you proposed to one of the hottest women on the planet, who's a Philadelphia Eagles cheerleader at the time, on the field during halftime of a football game. Tell me about that.
You know, it was amazing. I met my wife the day I saw her. I knew she was going to be my wife. I loved her from the minute I saw her. She is the most supportive. She's been through everything with me. The tours in Iraq, through fighting, fight camps, daddy not being home. You're watching me win or lose. She can care less whether I win or lose, how much money we make. She doesn't care. All she cares about is family. You know, when I called the Eagles to check to see if I could make this happen, I only had a week to do it. You know, I didn't plan on proposing until before I left for Iraq, which was 7 months. But I had found out from her twin sister that her dream proposal would be while she was out there cheering. Well, I knew I was going to miss the entire next football season because of my deployment to Iraq. So this was the last game I had a chance to do this. And so quickly I had to ask her father, ask her mom, hey, can I ask your daughter to marry me? Buy a ring, contact the Eagles and see if they'd let me do it. And of course, you know, I played the Iraq card saying, hey, look, I'm leaving. They loved it. They said, you can do it. I got the ring, and I had a week, so I got the ring. Her parents said absolutely no problem whatsoever. So the coaches told my wife, they said, hey, they told the team, it's Fan Appreciation Day. Someone with a lucky ticket stub gets a picture with all the cheerleaders after the game. So as I'm walking out there, my wife sees out of the corner of her eye somebody walks. She's like, no way, did Brian really get the right ticket stub? She had no idea. And then when I went in front of all these girls and I pointed to her and I said, come here, sweetheart. And she came out, she was just shaking. And I went down on one knee and pulled out the ring. And, you know, my wife bends over to kiss me and she said yes. So it was, that's up there, you know, that and my children being born are the best accomplishments I'll ever have.
Of course, I say you marry one of the hottest chicks on the planet, and then you say she has a twin sister. Life is pretty unfair, isn't it?
It is, I'll tell you what.
Tell me what this win that you had over Chris Lieben on New Year's Day, what does that mean for your career?
You know, I think for my career, it establishes me here in the UFC. I think for a long time, my last 3 fights, every time people talk about Brian Stann, there's so many people saying, when is this guy going to get out of the UFC? This is BS. He's their token veteran that they keep in there just for publicity and marketing. He has no skills. Get him out of here. I feed off that. You know, every time I walk in the gym, somebody's got to tell me what they say. And, you know, I think finally people start to believe because, I mean, there was maybe 3 people in the country that were picking me to win this fight. Everybody else said I was just going to get smashed. Yet me, my team, my manager, my family, we all knew I was going to win this fight. We knew this was my fight. We knew this was my time. Hopefully, I break into the top 10, but that's my goal for 2011. I want to be top 10 middleweight in the world and then challenge for a title.
After that win against Lieben, it propels you. It really announces that you have arrived in UFC. Who do you want to fight next?
This is a fight I've actually wanted for years. It's always been a dream for me, a career moment to fight Wanderlei Silva because I've looked up to him. I've been a fan of his for years before I ever put gloves on. I've watched him fight, and he's amazing. He's also one of the nicest guys in the sport when you meet him outside, and he is an absolute monster in the octagon. And I don't want to fight guys that are going to make me look better than I am. I don't want to fight guys and get some easy wins and only take 1 tough fight a year. I want to fight the best. I love the challenge. This is very spiritual, and to fight Wanderlei Silva would just be a great honor.
Speaking of honor, it's been a great honor for me to interview you. Thank you for doing the show, and good luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, this has been Fighting Words. Till next week, I'm Mike Straka. Enjoy the fights.